right, so we're in section 6.2 on page 275. Page 275, 6.2. All right, first thing you need to know is, what is a proportion? Well, it's an equation that states that two ratios are what? What's that word? Equivalent. They're equal, okay? All right, so that's a proportion. You need to write down the definition. What is a proportion? All right, so first method we're going to learn is what we call equivalent ratios. And you do need to memorize that this method is called equivalent ratios. And basically what we're doing here is we're finding the missing link between the sides of the ratio that we know. So how do I get from 6 to 18? What do I multiply by?
3.
I multiply by 3. So showing our work is as simple as just filling in that missing link in parentheses. Okay, so 6 times 3 is 18. What's 5 times 3?
15.
So x equals 15. All right, I want you to try the second and third one. Find that missing link and then tell me what x equals. All right, what was the missing link on the second one?
X equals 20.
Okay, it was 5 and then x equals 20. Very good, x equals 20. All right, what about the third one?
9.
Okay, missing link was 9. And then x equals 27. All right, who got both of those right? Who got both of those right? Pretty simple, okay? Equivalent ratios. Now, equivalent ratios isn't the only method, all right? And on your homework tonight, it's going to specify use equivalent ratios or use algebra to solve, all right? So let's go ahead and look at the algebra example. The algebra example, it says you can use the same method that you use to solve equations to solve proportions, and that's by multiplying by the reciprocal. So you look at the side that has the variable, and you multiply by whatever number is in your denominator. So you're getting the variable by itself. You guys remember doing this when we solved equations? Okay, so what are we going to multiply both sides by in the first one? 12. 12 over 1. Okay, now I'm just left with x. Now I have to multiply the other side by 12 over 1. And I get 6 over 2. So x equals 3. All right, so the key here is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal to get your variable by itself, and then to multiply it out. All right, I want you to go ahead and try the second and the third one. Use algebra. All right, so what do I multiply both sides by on the second one? 36, both sides. Multiply by 36, that's 9, and x equals? 27. All right, and then the next one, what do I multiply both sides by? 84, both sides. That cross reduces to 12, and x equals? 48. All right, who got both of those right? Okay, awesome. Good job. And those are the two methods that we're learning today. Okay, now there is one more example that I want to go over, and that's actually setting up a proportion. Now, the most important part about setting up a proportion is that you're comparing the same thing on both sides of the ratio. Okay, so in this case, it says, yesterday you rode your bike 18 miles in 2.5 hours. Today you plan to ride for 3.5 hours. If you ride at the same rate as yesterday, how far will you ride? Okay, so it gives you a couple of charts, but here's basically what it's saying. Okay, you compare miles to miles and hours to hours. So as long as it's miles over hours equals miles over hours, then you're good. Well, could you do hours over miles and hours over miles? Yeah, because you're still comparing hours and hours, miles and miles. Do you see how there's different ways that you could set this up? But here's the main thing. Make sure you're comparing the same unit on both sides of the proportion. Okay? All right, so here's how this would look in an example. Okay, each day an elephant eats 5 pounds of food for every 100 pounds of its body weight. Write and solve a proportion to determine how much food an elephant that weighs 93 pounds per day would eat. Okay? All right, so I want you to go ahead and try to set it up. And remember, make sure you're comparing maybe food to food over pounds to pounds, or however you want to do it, but compare the same thing on both sides. Try to set up your proportion. All right, so I'm going to set it up just basically how I read it. 5 pounds of food over every 100 pounds it weighs equals don't know how much food over it weighs 9,300 pounds. Do you see how I'm comparing the same thing? Food and food over pounds and pounds. Do you see that? Okay, so now I can solve it. Does it say which method to use? Nope, so I can solve it whatever method I want. I could solve it algebra. I could solve it equivalent ratios. I think equivalent ratios is probably the easiest because what's my missing link? 93. So what's 5 times 93? X equals 465, and make sure you label pounds of food. That would be a fun pet to have. Anybody want to feed their pet 465 pounds of food a day?
I don't want to feed my
Pet elephant. That's what you need to get.
crickets a day.
Okay. All right, guys. Okay, I want you to do one more. This is just different numbers, same type of example. I want you to practice writing a proportion and solving it. All right. Anybody want to volunteer? How did they set up their proportion? Wesley?
5 over 100 equals x over 15.
Perfect. And then who used algebra to solve? Anybody use algebra? Anybody use equivalent ratios? Yeah, that's the one I would use too. Okay, so equivalent ratios, what's my missing link? 15. So what's 5 times 15? Okay, that's much more respectable, right? 75 pounds of food. That other one was just a little extreme. Yeah, I know. 9,300. Do elephants weigh that much? I thought they weighed like a ton or 2 tons maybe. All right, guys, if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for 6.2.